The Louisiana sun beat down on Riverbend State Correctional Facility with merciless intensity, turning the concrete yard into a griddle. Terrence Mitchell stood near the basketball court, watching the game without really seeing it. 3 weeks. That's how long he'd been inside this medium-security prison, and every day felt like swallowing broken glass. Terry was built like the cop he used to be, 6'2", muscular frame that commanded respect, with closely cropped black hair and dark skin that gleamed with sweat under the brutal sun. His face carried the hardened lines of someone who'd seen the worst of humanity and still believed in justice. That belief had put him here. He'd reported them, his own brothers in blue, watched them shake down drug dealers for product instead of arrests, plant evidence on innocents, brutalize suspects in dark alleys. And when he'd gone to Captain Richard Donovan, a man he'd trusted, a man he'd worked under for 6 years, Terry thought he was doing the right thing. He would learn he was wrong through the harshest lesson, coming from the person he trusted most. Donovan had smiled, shaken his hand, promised immediate action. 2 weeks later, Terry was arrested. Evidence tampering, false arrest charges, witness intimidation. All of it fabricated, all of it airtight. Donovan hadn't just been complicit. He'd been running the whole operation, and Terry had handed him the perfect opportunity to eliminate the only honest cop who knew. The trial was a formality. Corrupt cops testifying against him, manufactured evidence, a jury that saw a black cop gone bad and didn't need much convincing. 15 years. Mitchell! Terry turned. Correctional Officer Travis Brennan stood at the edge of the yard, meaty arms crossed over his chest. Brennan was everything Terry had learned to recognize in his years on the force. A bully with a badge. White, mid-40s, with a beer gut and cold blue eyes that carried the particular gleam of a man who enjoyed his power. Everyone in Riverbend knew Brennan. He ran his shifts with an iron fist, and the division was clear. White inmates got leniency. Black inmates got hell. It wasn't even subtle. Brennan would walk past white prisoners breaking rules, then write up black inmates for breathing wrong. "Yeah?" Terry kept his voice level. "Warden wants to see you. Let's go." Terry's instincts, honed by a decade on the streets, immediately went on alert. The warden hadn't requested him. This was something else. But you didn't argue with COs in prison, not unless you wanted to make your life exponentially worse. He followed Brennan across the yard. As they walked, Brennan leaned close enough that Terry could smell the tobacco on his breath. "Heard you used to be a cop," Brennan said, voice low. "That true?" "Was." "Huh. Funny thing, a cop ending up in here. Must have really fucked up." Brennan's smile was razor thin. "Or maybe you just forgot which side you were supposed to be on." Terry said nothing. In his peripheral vision, he caught movement. 3 white inmates peeling away from the wait area, their trajectory casual but deliberate. His cop brain cataloged it automatically. Coordinated movement, focused intent, predatory spacing. They weren't going to the bathroom. They were going to intercept. "You know what happens to cops in prison, Mitchell?" Brennan continued, his tone conversational. "Especially black cops. Nobody likes a traitor. Not the whites, not the brothers. You're alone in here. Might want to remember that." The 3 inmates, all white, all displaying crude prison tats and the lean muscle of men who'd done serious time, stepped into their path. The leader, a guy with a shaved head and a swastika on his neck, smiled. "Well, well, look what we got here," Swastika said, eyeing Terry. "New meat thinks he can just walk around our yard like he owns it." Terry stopped, his body automatically shifting into a defensive stance. Years of training didn't just disappear. He'd handled bigger threats on street corners in New Orleans at 3 a.m. "We got a problem?" Terry asked quietly. "Yeah, we got a problem." Swastika stepped closer. "Problem is, boys like you need to learn respect. This ain't your neighborhood, boy." The racial slur hung in the air like gasoline fumes waiting for a match. Around them, other inmates stopped what they were doing, sensing the shift in atmosphere. Some moved closer to watch. Others backed away, not wanting to be involved. Terry's eyes flicked to Brennan. The CO stood 10 feet away, arms still crossed, watching with an expression of bored interest. He wasn't going to intervene. This was theater, and Brennan had a front-row seat. No, this was more than theater. This was a setup. Terry recognized it immediately. The timing too perfect. Brennan calling him over at exactly the right moment. These three positioned exactly where they'd intercept. The other COs mysteriously absent from this corner of the yard. Someone wanted Terry hurt. Or dead. Or at least in enough trouble that he'd disappear into solitary for months. Swastika shoved Terry's shoulder. "You hear me talking to you?" Terry didn't move, didn't react. Every muscle in his body was coiled, ready, but his face remained impassive. He'd learned long ago that violence was a tool, not a reflex, and in this moment, fighting back was exactly what they wanted. "I hear you," Terry said evenly. "Then show some fucking respect." Another shove, harder this time. The yard had gone quiet. 50 inmates watching, waiting to see what the new guy would do. Would he fight? Would he fold? Every prison was an ecosystem of predators and prey, and the first real test defined where you fell in that hierarchy. The first word, the first reaction, the first move, in short, the first impression, was crucial, as it could affect your entire time in prison. Terry looked past Swastika to his two friends, then to the other inmates watching, then, deliberately, to Brennan. "Officer Brennan," Terry said, his voice carrying across the yard. "You seeing this?" Brennan's expression didn't change. "Seeing what, Mitchell? Looks like you're having a conversation." Conversation? Terry almost smiled. So that's how it was going to be. Swastika grabbed Terry's shirt. "Don't you call for the guard like some bitch?" Terry moved. Not aggressively, defensively. He stepped back, breaking the grip, hands up in a non-threatening gesture. "I don't want trouble." Too late for that. Swastika swung. The punch was telegraphed, sloppy, driven by ego rather than training. Terry could have countered it a dozen ways. Could have put Swastika on the ground in 3 seconds. But that would make him the aggressor. That would give Brennan exactly what he needed. Instead, Terry turned his head, letting the punch glance off his cheek rather than taking it full force. It still hurt. Swastika had prison muscle behind it, but it wasn't devastating. Terry stumbled back, playing it up slightly. "Brennan!" someone shouted from the crowd. Now other COs were running over, whistles blowing. But Brennan took his time, sauntering over with theatrical slowness. All right, break it up." Brennan grabbed Terry's arm, yanking him away from the group. The other COs corralled Swastika and his friends, but with noticeably less force. "He started it!" Terry heard someone from the crowd yell. "Mitchell didn't do nothing." But Brennan wasn't listening. He had Terry's arm twisted behind his back, walking him forcefully toward the building. "Fighting in the yard," Brennan said loud enough for everyone to hear. "That's 48 hours in the hole, Mitchell. Should have kept your head down." "I didn't fight back," Terry said. "That's not what I saw. I saw you provoke an altercation with 3 inmates. Saw you take a swing first." "That's bullshit, and you know it." Brennan slammed Terry against the concrete wall, face first, hard enough to split Terry's lip. Stars exploded across his vision. Although his anger flared at this premeditated racism, there was one thing he knew well as a police officer: to remain calm and keep his emotions in check, even in the most complicated situations. "You calling me a liar, inmate?" Brennan hissed in his ear. "Because that's insubordination on top of fighting. I can make this a week. I can make this a month. Your choice." Terry tasted blood. Around them, inmates watched in tense silence. This was the message: speak up, and it gets worse. "No, sir," Terry said through gritted teeth. "That's what I thought." Brennan hauled him toward the segregation unit. As they walked through the corridors, Terry's mind was already working. This wasn't random. Brennan had been waiting for him. The confrontation had been staged. The timing, the location, the lack of other guards, all of it orchestrated. Someone wanted Terry isolated, vulnerable, broken. And there was only one person on the outside with the reach and motivation to arrange something like this inside: Donovan. Segregation was a concrete box 6 feet by 8 feet, with a steel door, a toilet, and a thin mattress on a concrete slab. No windows. One fluorescent light that stayed on 24 hours. A slot in the door for food trays. Terry sat on the bunk, pressing the thin blanket to his split lip, and let himself think. 48 hours wasn't about punishment. It was about isolation. It was about sending a message. You're alone. We can get to you any time. Nobody will help you. Donovan had reach, had money, had connections. Of course he'd have someone inside making sure Terry's life was hell, making sure that if Terry tried to appeal, tried to fight his case, he'd be too busy surviving to do anything about it. Brennan was dirty. That much was obvious. The question was, how dirty? Was he just taking money to make Terry's life difficult? Or was he part of something bigger? Terry closed his eyes, forcing himself to breathe slowly, to think like a cop instead of an inmate. Evidence. That's what he needed. Not assumptions, not theories. Hard evidence that Brennan was on Donovan's payroll. Evidence that the corruption went beyond just harassment. So, how do you gather evidence when you're locked inside a box? That was exactly the first question he asked himself. In this silent isolation, he had plenty of time to think. There was nothing around to distract him. The hours crawled by. They brought him meals through the slot. Cold, tasteless slop that Terry ate mechanically because he needed the calories. Time lost meaning in the whole. Could have been 6 hours or 16. The fluorescent light never changed, never dimmed. Terry did push-ups, sit-ups, paced the small space, kept his mind sharp by reciting case law, recalling details from old investigations, building mental maps of the prison layout. On the second day, or what he thought was the second day, a voice came through the door slot. "Mitchell, you awake?" Terry moved to the door. Through the slot, he could see part of a face. Not Brennan. Another guard. Younger, black, with uncertain eyes. "I'm awake," Terry said. "I'm C.O. Johnson." The young guard's voice was quiet. I wanted you to know. What happened in the yard. That wasn't right. A lot of us saw it. Brennan set you up." Terry's pulse quickened, but he kept his voice calm. "Why are you telling me this?" "Because I'm tired of his shit. Brennan's been running roughshod for 2 years. Administration knows, but nobody does anything because he's got friends upstairs. He gets away with—" Johnson paused. "He gets away with things that aren't right. Like staging fights. Like a lot of things. Look, I can't do much. But I wanted you to know. Some of us, we're not like him. Some of us still believe in doing this job right." Terry pressed his face closer to the slot. "Johnson, I need you to listen to me carefully. I was a cop for 10 years. I know how investigations work. If Brennan's dirty, there's evidence. Phone records, bank accounts, patterns of behavior. If I could get access— I can't help you with that, Johnson said quickly. I could lose my job, my family. I'm not asking you to stick your neck out, but if you see something, if you hear something, just remember it. That's all. Johnson was quiet for a long moment. Why'd they send you here? For real? I reported corrupt cops. My captain was running the whole operation. He framed me to cover it up. Jesus. Johnson exhaled slowly. And now he's got Brennan on you. That's my theory. It's more than theory. Brennan got a deposit last month, $12,000. We all noticed because he showed up with a new truck. When anybody asked, he said it was an inheritance. But— Johnson hesitated. Nobody believed him. $12,000. That was more than petty bribe money. That was contract money. Payment for a specific job. Making Terry's life hell. Or worse. Johnson, Terry said quietly. How many other guards think like you? More than you'd guess. But we keep quiet because speaking up means ending up like you. Or worse, losing our jobs in an economy where nobody's hiring. I understand, but here's the thing about staying quiet. It only helps people like Brennan, like Donovan. They count on good people doing nothing. Johnson was silent. I'm not asking you to be a hero, Terry continued. I'm just asking you to remember what you see. Because eventually, I'm going to need witnesses. And when that time comes, I hope you'll find your courage. Your 48 hours are up in 3 hours, Johnson finally said. Brennan's back on shift tomorrow. Watch yourself. The slot closed. Terry sat back down on the bunk, his mind racing. $12,000. A new truck. Brennan wasn't just harassing inmates for kicks. He was on someone's payroll. Donovan's payroll. But knowing it and proving it were different things. Terry needed more. He needed documentation. He needed allies. He needed to survive long enough to build a case that would bring both Brennan and Donovan down. The fluorescent light hummed above him. 48 hours in the hole, and all he'd done was confirm what he already suspected. But confirmation was a start. And Terrence Mitchell had always been patient, had always been thorough, had always believed that justice, real justice, required evidence and precision. They'd put him in here to break him, to isolate him, to make him just another broken cop in a system designed to crush the people who tried to fix it. They'd made a mistake, because Terry wasn't just a cop. He was a cop who'd spent 10 years learning how to take down organizations from the inside, how to build cases brick by brick, how to identify leverage points and exploit them. Brennan thought he was in control. Donovan thought he'd neutralized the threat. They were both wrong. Terry leaned back against the cold concrete wall and allowed himself a small, grim smile. He'd been a cop his whole adult life. He knew how to investigate. He knew how to build networks. He knew how to find the cracks in any system. And this prison? This corrupt, rotting system that men like Brennan and Donovan thought they owned? It was full of cracks. Once the cracks grew large enough, the creaking would begin. Terry just needed to find the right people. The ones who were tired of the injustice. The ones who still had a line they wouldn't cross. The ones who, like him, believed that there was still such a thing as right and wrong. They were here. In every prison, there were inmates and guards who'd been pushed too far, who'd seen too much, who were waiting for someone to stand up first. Terry had 48 hours to rest, to plan, to prepare. And when those doors opened, he'd start building something Brennan and Donovan would never see coming. Not a riot. Not violence. Not chaos. Something more dangerous. Unity. In the darkness of the segregation cell, Terrence Mitchell closed his eyes and began to map out his strategy. The reckoning was coming. The steel door to segregation opened after 48 hours, and Terry stepped back into the general population with eyes that had seen clarity in darkness. Brennan was waiting, leaning against the corridor wall with that same predatory smile. "Welcome back, Mitchell. Hope you learned your lesson." Terry met his gaze with calm neutrality. "Yes, sir." Brennan's smile faltered slightly. He'd expected anger, defiance, fear. Instead, he got compliance that felt somehow dangerous in its steadiness. "Get back to your cell. Counts in 20 minutes." Terry walked past him without another word. As he moved through the corridors back to his housing unit, he observed everything with fresh eyes. Guard rotations, camera positions, blind spots, inmate groupings, the social geography of power. His cellmate was a wiry white guy in his 50s named Dale Hutchins, doing 8 years for embezzlement. Dale had kept his distance since Terry arrived, the way most inmates did with ex-cops. When Terry entered the cell, Dale looked up from his book with obvious relief. "Heard you got set up," Dale said quietly. "Whole yard saw it. Brennan's a piece of shit." Terry sat on his bunk. "Seems to be the consensus. Look, I don't know what you did before you came in here, but—" Dale hesitated. "That thing with Brennan? It's not going to stop. He gets paid to make people disappear into the system. You're marked now." "By who?" Dale shrugged. "Don't know specifics, but there's talk. Money flowing from outside. Brennan suddenly buying new shit. He's got protection from administration. Does favors for people with reach." He lowered his voice further. "Smart money says someone powerful wants you broken. What if I told you I know exactly who?" Dale's eyes widened. "Then I'd say you're in deeper shit than I thought." "Maybe. Or maybe I'm exactly where I need to be to do something about it." Terry leaned forward. "Dale, you strike me as someone who's good with numbers, details. You notice patterns?" "I'm an accountant. Was an accountant. Yeah, I notice patterns." "Then tell me this. How long has Brennan been here?" 2 years. Started right after the previous CO got transferred for beating an inmate half to death." "And the pattern of his behavior? Always racial?" Dale nodded slowly. "Always. Black inmates get written up for nothing. White inmates get away with murder, sometimes literally. But it's not just racism. It's systematic, like he's following orders." "What if those orders came with $12,000 attached?" Dale's face went pale. "How do you know that?" "A guard told me. A good one. Said Brennan deposited 12 grand last month, claimed it was inheritance." "Jesus." Dale sat back. "That's not petty bribe money." "No, that's contract money. Someone hired him to make my life hell. Probably to make sure I never get my appeal heard, never cause problems, maybe even die in here if the opportunity presents itself." "And you think you can fight that?" Terry smiled grimly. "I don't think. I know. Because here's what men like Brennan always forget. Prisons run on ecosystems. Guard power is real, but it's also fragile. It depends on inmates staying divided. Black against white. Gangs against independents. Everyone isolated in their own survival. You want to unite people." Dale's voice carried disbelief and something else, hope. "I want to show them the truth. That Brennan isn't just a racist asshole. He's a criminal. That his corruption hurts everyone in here, white and black. That the only way to stop him is together. They'll kill you for trying." "Maybe, but I was a cop for 10 years. I know how to build cases. how to gather evidence, how to turn systems against themselves. Terry stood up. And I know that every prison has good people who are tired of the injustice. I just need to find them. Dale was quiet for a long moment. Then, the chapel. Saturday services. It's the one place where racial lines blur. Old-timers, guys who found religion, people just looking for peace. Brennan avoids it because he hates the chaplain. Why? Chaplain's black, ex-military, doesn't take shit from anybody, and he's got protection from the state because he's religious staff. Brennan can't touch him. Terry filed that away. What's his name? Chaplain Marcus Wright, former Army chaplain, did 2 tours in Iraq. He's seen evil, and he's not impressed by Brennan's bullshit. Saturday, I'll be there. The prison chapel was a modest space. 30 folding chairs, a simple altar, walls painted institutional beige. But when Terry entered on Saturday morning, he felt something he hadn't felt since arriving. Peace. Chaplain Marcus Wright stood at the front, a man in his 60s with silver hair, dark skin weathered by time and war, and eyes that had seen suffering and still chose compassion. About 20 inmates sat scattered in the chairs, a mix of races, ages, backgrounds. Terry took a seat in the back. Wright noticed him, nodded once in acknowledgement, and began. "Today I want to talk about justice," Wright said, his voice carrying the authority of someone who'd commanded soldiers and now commanded respect. Not revenge, not violence, justice, the kind that requires courage, the kind that requires standing up even when it's dangerous. The inmates listened. Some shifted uncomfortably. Others leaned forward. "I know what goes on in this facility," Wright continued. "I know about the discrimination, the corruption, the good men and women, guards and inmates, who stay silent because speaking up means retaliation. I know because I see it every day. And I'm tired of it." Someone in the front row muttered agreement. "But here's the thing about injustice," Wright said. "It only survives when good people do nothing. When we convince ourselves that we're powerless, that the system is too big, too corrupt, too dangerous to challenge." He paused. "That's a lie. Every system, no matter how corrupt, has cracks. And those cracks are where light gets in." After the service, as inmates filed out, Wright gestured to Terry to stay back. "Terrence Mitchell, former NOPD, 10 years on the force, arrested for crimes you didn't commit because you reported corruption." Wright's voice was matter-of-fact. "I make it my business to know everyone who comes through here, especially the ones who still have fire in their eyes." "Chaplain." "Marcus." "Please." He sat down in one of the folding chairs. "I heard about what happened in the yard. Brennan set you up. Not the first time he's done it. Won't be the last unless someone stops him." "I intend to stop him." Marcus studied him. "How?" "By building a case, gathering evidence, uniting people across racial lines, showing everyone that Brennan's corruption hurts all of us." Terry leaned forward. "But I need help. I need people who still believe in justice. People who have access to information, who can document patterns, who won't stay silent anymore." "That's dangerous talk. I'm already a dead man if I don't fight back. Brennan's been paid to destroy me, probably by my former captain, who's corrupt as they come. I've got nothing to lose and everything to gain." Marcus was quiet for a long moment. Then, "There's a group, informal, guards and inmates who are sick of what this place has become. We call ourselves the witnesses. We document. We remember. We wait for someone brave enough to act." He met Terry's eyes. "You might be that someone." "How many?" 12 inmates, 5 guards, all of them tired of the injustice, all of them waiting for a catalyst. "Introduce me." Over the next 2 weeks, Terry met them one by one. In the library, during work detail, in the yard when Brennan wasn't on shift. The witnesses were diverse: black, white, Hispanic, young and old. Some were lifers who'd found purpose in documenting corruption. Others were short-timers who wanted to leave knowing they'd made a difference. Theo Johnson was part of it. So was Dale, his cellmate. A white inmate named Tommy Reeves, who'd been beaten by Brennan for defending a black friend. A Hispanic guard named Rodriguez, who'd been threatened with termination for reporting Brennan's behavior. They shared stories, patterns, evidence. Brennan had been depositing suspicious amounts for months. Not just 12,000, that was recent, but smaller amounts, 500 here, 1,000 there, always in cash. He'd orchestrated at least 6 other incidents like Terry's, staged confrontations that resulted in inmates getting hurt or spending months in solitary. He had a burner phone that he used in the guard break room, always stepping outside for certain calls. And, most damning, he'd been recorded, audio only, by Rodriguez, talking about the arrangement with someone he called the captain, saying things like, "the target's handled," and "payment received." It wasn't enough yet. Not for a conviction, but it was enough to start building something bigger. Terry coordinated it all like the investigation it was. He had Dale create spreadsheets of Brennan's financial patterns. Johnson documented guard rotation anomalies. Tommy gathered inmate testimonies. Rodriguez kept recording whenever he could. And Terry planned the end game. The opportunity came 3 weeks after Terry's release from the hole. Brennan got greedy. A young black inmate named Marcus, same name as the chaplain, which everyone found poetically appropriate, was jumped in the shower by white supremacists. It was brutal, obviously coordinated, and Brennan responded by writing up Marcus for fighting, ignoring the 3 white inmates who'd actually done the attacking. It was the last straw. That night, the witnesses met in the chapel. All 17 of them, inmates and guards together, which itself was unprecedented. "This ends now," Terry said quietly. "We have documentation of Brennan's financial irregularities, audio recordings of him discussing payments, testimony from dozens of inmates about discriminatory treatment, and now we have video evidence. Rodriguez managed to capture footage of him ignoring the attack on Marcus while writing Marcus up." "What's the play?" Tommy asked. "We go over Brennan's head, past the warden, who's probably dirty too, straight to the Department of Corrections Inspector General and the FBI. "They won't listen," someone muttered. "They will," Chaplain Wright said firmly, "because I'm the one delivering it. I have credentials, I have credibility, and I have documentation that will force them to investigate." "But we need one more thing," Terry said. "We need to prove the connection to Captain Donovan. We need to catch Brennan taking a call, mentioning the captain by name, confirming the arrangement." Rodriguez pulled out his phone. "I've been monitoring his pattern. He takes a call every Thursday at 3 p.m., steps outside to the back loading area where there's less security. If we can get close enough with recording equipment—" "I can do it," Johnson said. "I'm scheduled for perimeter patrol Thursday. I can position myself near the loading area, record the whole thing." Terry looked around the room. "Everyone understand what we're risking? If this fails, Brennan will come down on all of us. Hard." "We understand," Dale said. "But doing nothing isn't an option anymore." The others nodded. Unity, Terry thought. Real unity. Not based on race or gang affiliation, but on shared principle. Shared exhaustion with injustice. This was what Brennan and Donovan had never anticipated. Thursday at 3 p.m., C.O. Johnson stood near the loading area with his phone recording in his pocket. Terry was in the yard, deliberately visible, watching Brennan from a distance. Brennan stepped outside right on schedule, burner phone to his ear. His body language was tense. Johnson's recording captured everything. "Telling you, Captain, this is getting complicated. The Mitchell situation should have been handled by now, but he's got people talking. I need another payment if you want this continued." "No, I understand." "Yes, sir. Captain Donovan, sir. I'll handle it. Just make sure the wire transfer comes through." Johnson's hands trembled as he listened. He had it. Brennan's voice. Donovan's name. Confirmation of payments. Admission of conspiracy. 48 hours later, Chaplain Wright sat in the Inspector General's office in Baton Rouge with a file 3 inches thick. Financial records, audio recordings, video evidence, testimonies from 17 witnesses, guards, and inmates. The IG listened, took notes, asked questions, then made phone calls. Within a week, FBI agents arrived at River Bend. They arrested CO Travis Brennan in front of the entire facility, walked him out in handcuffs while inmates and guards watched in stunned silence. 2 days after that, Captain Richard Donovan was arrested at NOPD headquarters. Corruption, conspiracy, evidence tampering, wire fraud. The charges kept mounting as the investigation expanded. And 36 days after that arrest, Terry stood in a courtroom while a judge reviewed the evidence that had exonerated him. Donovan's conspiracy, fully exposed. The manufactured case against Terry, completely dismantled. "Mr. Mitchell," the judge said, "this court finds that your conviction was obtained through fraud and corruption. Your sentence is hereby vacated. You are free to go." Terry walked out of that courtroom into Louisiana sunshine as a free man. Chaplain Wright waited outside with several of the witnesses who'd been released or transferred. "What will you do now?" Marcus asked. Terry looked at them. This group of people who'd risked everything to stand up for justice, who'd proven that unity and courage could defeat even the most entrenched corruption. "I'm going back to being a cop," Terry said quietly. "But this time, I'll do it right. This time, I'll remember what you all taught me. That justice requires courage. That systems change when good people refuse to stay silent." He shook hands with each of them, then walked toward freedom, carrying the weight of what they'd accomplished together. Behind him, the prison stood as it always had. Brutal, unforgiving, unjust. But inside those walls, something had shifted. The witnesses remained, documenting, remembering, waiting for the next person who needed allies in the fight against corruption. Terrence Mitchell had entered River Bend State Correctional Facility alone, marked for destruction. He left it free, having proven that even in the darkest places, justice could still win, if people were brave enough to fight for it together. The reckoning had come, and justice, finally, had been served.